All right, welcome to the stream. We're going to be going over the Zibo walkthrough this time with a shorter flight so we can finish everything into one live stream. This is going to be about an hour and a half flight from Toronto to Philadelphia, American Airlines 6278. So once again, I'm going to show you all the flight planning and the checklists and everything. I'll link everything in the description of the stream or the video when it's done. So first of all, let's open up SimBrief again. So we're going to be flying American Airlines 6278, departing from Toronto to Philadelphia. We have been given JFK as an alternate, and we'll be departing around 21:00. The current time is about 20:30 Zulu, so it gives us about 30 minutes to do our checklists and our pre-flight. Units, once again, in pounds. We're going to use the 737, but we're just going to borrow WestJet's information here. So if we actually have a look, our call sign, our call sign, our registration is November 980, Alpha November. Our FIN number should be on the nose pylon, which is 3 Delta November. And our cell cal is usually found inside. This is, of course, not really necessary for the flight planning, but it's just good to know. BDJL. There we go. And so you can see I have sort of inputted into these 3 boxes here. I'm just going to find the cruise profile for American Airlines as well. And American flies with a cruise profile or cost index of 35. Okay, so we input all our information for flight information, aircraft type, advanced aircraft options. We're going to be departing runway 23 and arriving runway 27 left for now. We might have to change that as we get closer. I'm just going to change these once again to my default settings. Extra fuel, let's grab, actually we don't need extra fuel. And let's just put in, let's say, 6 tons of cargo. Everything else should be fine. So let's generate the flight plan. We won't be flying on VATSIM today, so I can just show you what it's like when you're the only person around and there's no air traffic controller. So there's our flight plan. I'm just going to overview this quickly. So here we have our routing, just a general information. Here is our flight altitude, our cruise altitude. Here is our cost index, our average winds, our standard deviation of temperature. Here is our block fuel and our final reserve fuel. Here we have our routing on the second page. And then here we have our weight. So passenger, cargo, payload, zero fuel weight, fuel, total takeoff weight, and landing weight is all here. And then after that is just the detailed flight plan itself, followed by the wind information, which is somewhat important if you want a well-calculated estimated time of arrival and everything like that. Then we have weather notices to airmen. And if we scroll down a little bit more, we'll see the charts when it comes to significant weather, winds, and just elevation and altimeter setting changes. Okay, so let's hop into the Zibo and let's get started. Hello. Okay, so we'll pull up our checklists. Parking brake is set. Battery guard is closed. Standby power guard closed. Fuel pumps not necessary, not required. Start BAPU. While that's starting up, I'm actually just going to send the links to the checklist I have in chat so that you can follow along. All right. So we have 13,439 pounds of fuel. I'm just going to enter that here while we're waiting. Let's start ground services. Let's go to ground services, open the passenger door. And let's go to fuel weight and balance payload. I'm going to put in 13439 pounds. And let's get the fuel truck going now. All right, let's check up on that APU. APU is almost ready. There we go. So APU gen's on. Make sure that it's working up here on this panel. Oop. There we go. Amps and volts and frequency is correct. Position lights steady. Logo light not required because it's daytime. Cabin lights are okay as they are. Emergency exit lights are now armed by just closing the guard. Passenger signs not yet as we're still refueling. Packs to auto. APU bleed can be turned on. It's not on the checklist, but that just supplies air to the cabin. And then IRS mode selectors to nav. And now the dreaded flight management computer. So first of all, we'll go to initial reference, next page, select one of the GPS coordinates and put it here, and we can clear away these messages. So now we go to route, and let's input our route today. On page 2, we're going from Pearson to Philadelphia. American Airlines, flight 6278. All right, so first thing we have is we input our standard departure. So on departures, we go to Regis 4, and the departure runway is 23. No transition, so that's fine. Go back to route, go to next page, and then we put the next waypoint in our flight plan. Since this is short, we don't have a next waypoint, so we go to arrival now. And we're arriving from the Boja to Star PSB transition as listed on our flight plan. And according to the winds we have today, we'll be landing from the other side. So we'll choose runway 27 left for landing. We'll choose the ILS27 left. And ZYN transition, as there's only one. Go back to route, go to activate, and then go to execute. And so now we go to our performance numbers. For performance, we're going to have to input our passenger weights. So we might as well get the flight leg started. And we'll go to payload. We've got 150 passengers on board today. So I'm just going to take out 10 randomly. There we go. And 6 tons of cargo. Split it evenly between the two. So we have a payload total of 34,770 pounds, rounded to 34.8 as listed on our flight plan. All right. The fuel truck seems to be already done. And it is. So when fueling is complete, we can turn on these seatbelt signs. So passengers can start getting... sign is on. Yeah, there you go. Be seated and fasten your seatbelt. All right, let's go down here to gross weight. Just click that, that's fine. Our planned fuel of 13.4 tons. Final reserve fuel is 2.3, but we'll round up to 2.4. Cost index is 35. Cruise altitude of 330. Average cruise winds is 269 at 70. And standard temperature deviation is 1 degree Celsius. So 1C, enter here, and then execute. For N1 limit, we'll leave these as they are again. There's no need to derate. And then what we're actually going to do is we're going to go back to legs, and we're going to select route data. And we're going to have a look at the winds on page 6. So after our climb, the first waypoint will be PSB, and we see the winds here are 279 at 76. I'm going to put that there. And then we're just going to do this for all the waypoints up until our top of descent. Which is actually right there. As you can see on page 6, there's no more winds after HAR, so that will be it. We'll execute, go to descent, go to forecast, and then we can also put our descent winds here. I'm just going to choose 3 of the 5 listed at sort of evenly spaced altitudes so that the FMC has a good idea of the winds at descent. And execute. All right, so if we click init ref, it will put us here because the IRS are still aligning. So we'll just cycle through to takeoff. And then we'll put our takeoff settings here. So we'll use flaps 5. Again, it's just a normal takeoff. Center of gravity is listed there. And those are our V speeds right there. And that is everything we need to do for the flight management computer. So we would request for flight plan clearance at this point. That's not required as we're not online. So we're just going to do transponder. The standard transponder setting for IFR is 2200, so we'll just list it there. IAS Mach speed, what we're going to do is we're going to dial the V2 speed, which is 146. And then our heading for takeoff, which is runway 23, which has a heading of 237. And initial altitude, we'll climb straight to our cruise altitude of flight level 330. Our yaw damper can turn on. Window heat can turn on. Flight altitude of 330. And then we just need the landing altitude, which is the field elevation at Philadelphia, which is 36 feet. So we can just leave it at 0, honestly, or we could leave it at 50. I'll just leave it at 50 for this flight. Next is flight directors, which is on the autopilot panel here, one here, and one here. Landing altitude, sorry, my bad, LNAV and VNAV. Since this is a vectored departure, we're going to select heading selector. Oh, my bad. It still needs to align itself first, and then VNAV, so we'll just leave that be for now. Given we started aligning about 6 minutes ago, I want to say, there's still about like 2 or 3 minutes left for it to align. We'll just give it some time. So we'll just continue on with the checklist for now. So the minimums reference is for takeoff, not really required at Toronto. And then the altimeter reference, which we'll get from the weather METAR, is 2982. What we could also do is we could just match up the yellow bar here to the ground, and we'll have our ground level, and we'll have our altimeter setting anyway. Anyway, the IRS mode selectors have aligned everything now, so we can just click heading selector and VNAV. As we're finishing our checklist, and then auto brake to RTO, rejected takeoff. Comms are not required because we're not online, and it's just a matter of closing doors. So we'll just simulate that the passengers have a little bit more to load as we actually look at the charts. So we'll load the Pearson charts. We have the airport charts themselves, which are down here. And we'll print the PDF for that. And we'll also need departure. And the departure today is the, let me check, the Regis 2 departure. Or the Regis 4 departure, that's the most updated one, which is this one here. So let's print that out. And we'll just save it here. All right, I'm just going to give you these charts on the stream again. So we're a little bit ahead of schedule still. I'm just going to configure things that I usually would check for as well. So we're just going to turn off these so they're not as cluttered on our navigation display. Maybe zoom out a little bit more so we have a good view. And what we could actually do is we could press legs here and click this knob to plan PLN. And then we can actually click step here and we can follow through our flight plan to make sure everything is as it should be and there's no random weird turn somewhere that brings us somewhere really far away. Just make sure the flight plan works. Okay, and then after Fergus, we will go for our ILS approach in. Cool, everything seems to be working. Put that back to map mode. I'll just check up here really quickly. And down here as well. Yeah, everything's good. Lastly, we could also test for the TCAS system. Just hold it on to test.
Adjust vertical speed. Adjust. Climb. Climb now. Climb. Climb now. Climb. Crossing. Climb. Climb. Crossing. Climb. 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 Clear of conflict. Descend. 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 Crossing. Descend. Descend. Crossing. Descend. Descend. Descend now. Descend. Descend now. Increase climb. Increase climb. Increase descent. Increase descent. Maintain vertical speed. Maintain. Maintain vertical speed. Crossing. Maintain. Monitor vertical speed. TCAS test. Pass.
And we'll also test the ground proximity warning system here.
Slide slow. Pull up. Wind shear. Wind shear. Wind shear. Terrain. Terrain. Pull up. Obstacle. Obstacle. Pull up. Airspeed low.
All right. We'll just depart early then. So what we're going to do now is we're going to make sure the doors are closed. We could do our passenger announcement, I guess. And we'll also get our pushbacks started.
Ground to cockpit. Please show me where you want to
I
go.
have this pre-planned already, so just press enter.
Ground to cockpit. TOW is driving up.
I'll leave the download link for this later on. So as the tow truck comes, we're going to turn on our auto throttle. We're going to turn on our fuel pumps. No fuel in the center tank, so the fuel pumps in the center don't need to be turned on. Electric hydraulic pumps need to be turned on. I'll give you a better view. There you go. Anti-collision light comes on. Parking brake, make sure that is still set here. And then the ground equipment is removed. And the engine area is clear.
Ladies and gentlemen, the boarding doors.
I'm just going to remove the jetway.
Okay, all doors and hatches are closed. Ready to connect. Set parking brake.
Oh, my bad. Okay, the cabin door should be closed by now, which it is. And that is our before start checklist complete.
Tow connected and bypass pin inserted. Release parking brake.
All right, parking brake comes off.
Starting pushback. And you may start engines.
And we may start engines. So second engine display, make sure it's on second display, so make sure that's on engine. We're going to turn off our air packs, which are over here. And then we're going to start engine. So this time we'll start engine 2 first. We're looking at N2. Once that reaches 25, we will introduce fuel. Fuel. And we're here to click. Start valve is off, so engine is stabilized. We're going to start engine 1. And introduce fuel for that one too. And there we go. So let's do our after start checklist or before taxi checklist.
Operation complete. Set parking brake.
We'll set the parking brake first. There we go. So
Disconnecting tow.
generators
Stand by.
1, 2 on. Okay. Just gonna check what happened. Not too sure. Everything still seems to be working, so we'll just leave it be. Generators 1, 2 on. Make sure generators 1 and 2 are working. Alright, probe heat on. Wing anti-ice and engine anti-ice not required. Packs can be turned on again. Isolation valve turned back to auto. APU bleed turned off. APU turned off. Engine start switches to continuous. Flap set for takeoff.
Hose disconnected and bypass pin has been removed. Hand signal on the right. We'll see you next time and have a safe flight.
So we'll have flaps 5. Elevator trim set for takeoff. So we're going to check what we have here in our takeoff, which is 4.75. There we go. We're going to check flight controls, so we can do that by selecting system here. Full left, full right, full up, full down, full left rudder, full right rudder. There we go. And there is our tow giving us a signal that he is clear. Recall, no lights turned back on, and we'll just clear lower display like that. Good. So now we're just going to taxi out. Let me pull up the airport chart for you. We are currently here at Terminal 3. We're going to taxi out on Alpha Kilo, taxi Alpha, taxi to hotel, hold short runway 23. All right, so taxi lights off, runway turn off lights not required. It's daytime, and we're just going to release the brake and power. Go to about 30% power for N1, and that should be enough to keep us rolling and will stop us from generating too much thrust and too much wake turbulence basically behind, not wake turbulence, jet blast behind the aircraft. They're inside the terminal area. just going to cut power so we can turn without accelerating too much. And we're going to turn on to alpha. Give us some power, and we're going to keep taxiing down alpha. Remember to taxi under 20 knots, which is found here at our ground speed. So when it comes to weather, you can actually check that if you don't have an external weather engine, or if you have separate sort of weather controls instead of live, you can actually check down on X-Plane by clicking M for map. It'll open up the map here, and then you'll probably have this view, to be honest. If you zoom into your airport, select your airport, and go to details and scroll down, after the frequencies, you'll actually see the conditions, which is basically the weather. So this will give you the cloud layers, the visibility, the wind speed, and the altimeter. So we can see here altimeter 29082. Those are our winds, 230 at 24 gusting 39. So 29082, and that's the setting I have here. And also winds from 230, which means that they're going to be a direct headwind, but they're going to be gusting pretty strong. So as we're taxiing out, I'm going to continuously monitor the airport charts to know where I am. So this is Alpha Delta here. So next is Hotel, which is where we're going to be turning right to runway 23. I usually turn at around 12 to 14 knots. This gives us good control as we turn. There's the runway 23 category 3 line or category 2 line. Category 3, my bad. Hold short line. And here is the hold short line for runway 23. going to slow down as we enter this sort of triple-lined taxiway line. And we're going to hold short right here. Parking brake on. Let's do our before takeoff checklist. So parking brake is set. Fuel flow, we will reset it and then put it back into rate. Center fuel pumps are not required. The icing is not required. Cabin lights will go to takeoff and landing. Flight instruments are checked. We'll make sure the speed is good. We have our V1 indicators here. We have our altitude strip here, and it's at the ground level with the correct altitude setting. And then we'll make sure that we are armed. Either heading selector LNAV here, depending on our departure, and VNAV is armed here. For engine display, we'll just make sure that we have the engine display here. N1, N2 is good. Vibrations are not too crazy. Oil quantity is still good. Oil temperature is still good. And we'll just check our fuel. And then lastly, the navigation equipment. We'll just make sure that we have it to our liking. I'll have weather on my side, and we'll have terrain on the captain's side. Or sorry, the first officer's side. And it's basically not too cluttered. I turn off the VORs. I have a good range here. So we're good for takeoff. This is where we get our takeoff clearance. So we'll just say we're clear for takeoff. Landing lights turn on. Taxi light turns off. Strobe lights turn on. Take off the brake, and we'll taxi onto the runway. Transponder, which is this here, can be turned all the way to the right to TARA. This will give us traffic advisories and resolution advisories. We'll make sure that we have
2, 3.
We'll make sure we have TFC here for traffic, so which will show us traffic. On the last stream, we saw what happens when there is traffic. And then just before rolling, we'll click the chronometer here so we can measure our air time. And that's our before takeoff checklist complete. I'm going to line up with runway 23.
On runway 23.
A little bit left of center line. We'll make sure that our heading indicator is in line with the heading selector here, which we selected as a runway heading. And then now it's just a matter of actually taking off. So before, so what we're going to do before is we're going to put our throttle to 40% N1, make sure that they accelerate at the same time and it's even distributed, nothing's blowing up. And then what we're going to do is we're going to click the mic button, which gives us our takeoff power on the Zibo. And now we're basically just going to look straight ahead to make sure that we're going where we're supposed to go, giving small adjustments. 80 knots check.
V1, rotate.
Rotate.
Positive brake.
Gear up. And now we're basically just going to match the flight directors ahead of us. For departure, we're actually going to turn heading 245 after we pass 1,000 feet. So we're going to follow that. And now that we're 1,000 feet above, we can do our after takeoff checklist. So auto brake can be turned off. Our engine start switches can be turned to off. As we are passing our flap settings here, we're going to move flaps up. We do have wind shear today at Pearson, so we're just going to make sure that we're at a high enough airspeed that we can't really stall. And just our switches are off, so here lever to the off position after we have 3 greens. Whoops, not looking forwards. That's wind shear right there. You can see our airspeed is going a little crazy. Our runway turn-off lights were never on, and then cabin lights can just go to cruise. So whenever we're ready, what we're going to do is we're going to go down to our flight management computer, and we're going to go to legs. We're going to click the first waypoint, and click the top left button, which is also our first waypoint, and then press execute, and then press LNAV in the flight autopilot. And this will direct us to our first waypoint on course. Very windy today at Toronto. As we can see, we're only at 6,000 or 7,000 feet, and we already have 70 knot winds. And this is why we have a seatbelt sign. So whenever you want autopilot to take over, all you have to do is you just have to press the CMD button here, which is the top left one of the 4 buttons here, and it will put autopilot on for you. At this point, we're passing 10,000 feet, so we can turn off our landing lights. And if we feel comfortable at this point, we can start turning off the passenger seatbelt sign. But as it is this windy at a low level, I'd rather keep them on for now. We also know from our weather report that we do have a few clouds as we're passing along the way up to our cruise altitude, so I'd rather pass them first before turning off the seatbelt sign in case of cloud turbulence. So now it's just a matter of climbing to our cruise altitude. We can actually check when we're going to reach that by clicking climb. And we're going to see to top of climb will be 2121 Zulu. Current time is 2110. I forgot to turn on the chronometer. We'll just turn it on now. And it'll be about 82 miles. The next thing we do is that it is common practice to dial the heading bug to our heading. This is so that in case of an autopilot failure or in case air traffic control directs you to vector somewhere else, you already have your heading selector pointed that way, so it's just a matter of turning it the way that air traffic control directs you to, or having it on heading selector mode ready if your LNAV fails. It's a very hazy day today. As we're passing 18,000 feet, we can turn our barometric setting back to standard. And we'll continue our climb. while we're climbing up, we're basically monitoring for clouds in case we have to turn on the engine start switches to continuous or turn on engine icing or wing icing. We're basically monitoring for icing, monitoring our climb speed, and basically our top of climb, and basically just engines. We have passed the freezing layer now, so our temperature is now below 0 degrees. So in case we enter cloud, we do have to turn on engine anti-icing as a precautionary measure. I will see you at the top of climb.
5,000 to go.
Alright, we are now nearing our top of the descent. So as we reach our top of the descent, we'll see that we'll be pitching down a little bit. And we will also be matching our cruise speed here. We have leveled off at 33,000 feet, so we can give our passenger level off announcement there. And we'll just make sure that we actually stay at 33,000 feet. So now's a good time to check our top of descent. So if we click descent, we'll see similarly to top descent, time is at 21:45, which is 25 minutes from now. And it's in 211 nautical miles. So I usually like to plan my top descent 10 minutes before the actual descent itself. So I'll be back when the time here is 21:35. Alright, as we are nearing our top of descent, we are going to prepare our checklist. So first of all, I'm actually going to get the charts for the airport. So we're going to type in the Philadelphia charts. Let's check our flight plan for our arrival. We're going to be using the budget to arrival. So that's, where is it? There it is. Budget to arrival. And we're using ILS27 left. Here's our airport chart. And here's our parking gates chart. Okay. So let's go through our before top of descent checklist now. 8 is an airport information. So once again, we could check by opening the map. If it's too far out, we might have to wait a little bit until we get closer to the actual location, which just seems to be the case. What we could actually do is we could just open a Google tab and search for METAR at Philadelphia. And it'll give us the weather currently. So we have the temperature here, dew point, pressure altimeter 3013, for winds, visibility, ceilings, and everything. So let's input our altimeter as a setup. So again, if we dial it without pressing standard, it will put it on standby for us with the white text. So all I have to do is just press the standard button to change it back to the actual altimeter setting that we set. Radios are not required as we're not online and we don't have air traffic control. So now we just have to reset the MCP altitude. What we're going to do is we're going to look at our chart. And we're going to see what is the first restriction we have. So as we're following the route from PSB Phillipsburg, we see the first restriction we have is at Bunce, and we have to expect 8,000 feet. This is not really a restriction. It says expected, but usually air traffic control would give it anyway, so we're just going to dial down to 8,000 feet here. Actually, no, sorry, we're going to dial down to 10,000 feet. This is because by aviation law, we're supposed to be under 250 knots by 10,000 when we're under 10,000 feet. So we just want to make sure that we're actually hitting that speed restriction before we get there. And then the FMC approach speed reference. So we're going to go to our flight computer, click init ref again, and we're going to choose a 30-degree flaps because this is a normal length runway, not a lot of crosswind. And we definitely have enough runway space. And we're going to click wind correction as well to get our wind correction knots, which is basically our buffer in case there are wind gusts that may suddenly put us under the stall speed. Lastly, we need our localizer frequency and our ILS course. So if we open up our ILS chart, we can see here we have the ILS DME frequency of 109.3, and we have the course of 267. We're also going to use, let's say, our go around procedure is, or the misapproach procedure is to climb to 1,500 and then turn left climbing turn to 3,000 feet direct ODD VOR. So we're going to put in the ODD VOR of frequency here, and since we're just climbing direct, we don't have a course to go there, but we do have a holding pattern course. So I'm actually going to dial in 32 course and 122.8 in our second navigation tool so that we can have the go around procedure ready in case we need to go around. So first of all, 109.3 here. and the course of 267. And then for the other side, we're going to put in the Woodstown VOR, which is our go-around VOR. And then put in the course of, I can barely see that, the course of 32. And just for extra situational awareness, we're actually going to put in the VOR on standby on VOR navigation number 2, in case we need to do auto land, which I highly doubt because the weather is pretty good in Philadelphia today. And same thing here on this side, we're going to put the go around VOR ready to go, just in case one of them fails. Just in case one of these fail, we have the other frequency on standby ready to go. And so that is our before top of the descent checklist complete. So now what I like to do is I like to pull up the star chart again and just compare our routing all the way down. So Phillipsburg, followed by Harrisburg, followed by Lancaster, followed by Boone, and then Lancaster, Trag, Bunce at 8,000, School at 6,200, and we don't have to worry about this because that's only for the runways 9 left, 9 right, and we're going to runways 27, followed by Bojid at 220 knots, expect 6,000, Heifel, Erie, and Furious expect 4,000. And also Erie, 190 knots. So now what we're going to do is we're going to compare that chart with our legs here. So as we can see, we're already past Phillipsburg and Harrisburg. We're onto Boone. So at Boone, that's that. Lancaster, no restriction. Trag, no restriction. Bunce, expect 8,000. So I'm actually going to put that in Bunce. And you can see our top of descent has moved much closer, which is why we planned this out a good 10 minutes beforehand. We're going to execute now so that the computer will know it's time to descend soon. And in fact, it should be descending now, which it is. School, no restriction. And then Bojid, at Bojid, 220 knots, and also expect 6,000. So we're going to put that there. Followed by Heifel, no restriction, Erie, 190 knots, Furious, 4,000. And then as you can see here, drag is required because we're descending pretty quickly, so we're going to press standard key to put our speed brakes up. We are now slowly reapproaching our glide path given our altitude restrictions. As you can see here, we are currently 7,200 feet above the flight path, and we're getting closer and closer. We're going to make sure our speed is around that notch, so in case we're descending too fast, we might need to descend slower so that our speed does not increase too much. And since we don't have air traffic control, we're going into vectors as part of our star. So at the end of the star, it just says keep a heading of 85 and fly 4,000 feet. So since we don't have air traffic control, we're going to manually change that. So what we're going to do is we're going to go to the first point of our ILS. And as you can see here, the first point of our ILS, if we go back into plan mode and zoom in a bit so we can actually see, the first part of our ILS is actually really far away, so we don't actually need that. The first one we really do need is at Festi here, which is in line with our ILS approach. So we're going to click Festi, and we're going to go all the way up to vectors. And what it's going to do is it's going to delete all the waypoints and all the vectors before that and put us straight from the last point of our star of Furious into the first point of our approach, which is Festi. So all we have to do is just press execute, and it's going to remember that for us. So back into map mode. Maybe zoom back out a bit so we can see up ahead. And as we're descending, we can also do our descent checklist. So de-icing is not really required. We're not in clouds yet. We do see clouds coming up, so we'll be preparing for that. Landing altitude, once again, we'll just check at Philadelphia. The landing altitude is... The touchdown zone is 10 feet, and the airport itself is at 57 feet. So 50 feet landing altitude is good. Recall, once again, we'll just check here. and then the rate altimeter and barrel minimum. So let me just pull up the chart again. As you can see, we're doing an ILS approach as we do have glide slope, so this one does not count. We're just doing the ILS itself. And we can see a decision altitude of 210 feet. We also see that we need a minimum runway visibility of 2,400 feet, or half statute mile, which we'll definitely have. So 210 feet. Let me just put that into the system that we have. Here, so we're going to click from radio to baro on the big knob here, and then we're going to go to 210 feet. Oh, I'm already past it. And as you can see here, we're approaching 18,000 feet, so I'm going to press standard again to put it back to our altimeter setting. Lastly, we need to calculate our auto brake. So let me go to the iPad here, and we actually have the performance landing here. So we're going to select the runway we're using, which is 27 left today. The winds, as we found before, were at 230 at 9, but that's surface winds, true, and we have some magnetic variance, so it's actually around here. It's 240 at 9. Outside air temperature is 22 degrees. Winter is gone. QNH of 1020. This is in hectopascals instead of inches of mercury, so you can actually just find a conversion on Google if you need to. Flaps 30, air conditioning will be on, anti-icing will be off, and we'll just see all the brakes. For the landing weight, we just have to go to payload, click any of these numbers, and you'll see our landing weight, 136,876. And then we put that here. Just make sure our VREF is as the same as our VREF here. Our VREF addition is the same as the addition here. Click to the next page, and we'll see any auto brake we have will be making it. So that's a good sign. And we'll also look at the airport chart here, and we'll see that if we're landing on 27 left, we actually need to taxi around this runway so that we don't have to cross. And in normal procedures, we taxi around it too, so we just don't have to deal with runway crossings. So honestly, it looks like as long as we pass the halfway point and further on, we're good to exit the runway, which is basically any of these. So I'll just select a auto brake of 2 here, as denoted here. As you can see, we're nearing 10,000 feet. We no longer need a speed brake, as indicated on our FMC. I'm just going to have these on cabin lighting so it's ready to go. We're going to zoom back in a little bit. And so that's our descent checklist complete. Put this back on leg so I can have a look at what we're going to be doing next. So as you can see on our map, we have a decel point up ahead. That basically means the point we're going to hit before we start to decelerate down to the restriction of 250 knots, or 250 knots under 10,000 feet. So the Zibo automatically puts it to 240, so there's just a little bit of buffer space.
$1,000 to go.
As you can see, we hit the decel point. We are now decelerating down to 240 knots. And once we pass 250 knots, I will dial our MCP altitude, or our autopilot altitude, down to 8,000, which is the restriction at Bunts. But I want to make sure that I meet that first, so we're not breaking any air law in a sense. If the VNAV does change the VNAV path does change the VNAV alt, then I'm going to have to, there it is, then I'm going to have to click altitude intervention so that it keeps descending. Which is fine, I'd rather slow down first. And there we go, so then I'm going to dial down to 8,000 now and press altitude intervention. And we're going to continue our descent. As you can see on our charts, the runway is over there. We can see those two runway lines depicting the runway is there. So as we look off to our right side and zoom in a bit, we might actually be able to find the airport now. If not, it's not really too much of a worry. We'll be able to find it later on final approach anyway. So around now, I'm going to turn on terrain radar on the right again, weather radar on the left, just in case. And as we're under 10,000 feet, I'm going to turn on the landing lights, make sure the seatbelt sign is on, which we never turned it off for this flight, but that's okay. Right now, I'm basically just trying to find the airport itself. It is a pretty hazy day, so it's hard to find anything. All right, as you can see, we have hit 8,000 feet at Bunce, so now we can descend further along our star. The next restriction is 6,000 feet. As you can see, we're still in VNAV path, so we can maintain our 6,000 feet. And we don't have to click altitude intervention this time. Once again, we have a deceleration point to meet our speed restriction at BOJID of 220 knots. And then there we go. The decel point has moved to there. It's okay. Airport should be much closer now, so we might be able to actually see it, and the sun is coming out a little bit. There it is. So that's the airport itself. As you can see, there is our runway. Runway 27 left. And now we're descending to our restriction of 6,000 feet at BOJID.
Thousand to go.
So as we're nearing our approach, we can actually see on our approach chart the identifier IGLC for our ILS approach. And we can actually see that on our primary flight display, IGLC. And we'll confirm that the course of 267 is also here, which means that we have the correct ILS tuned and selected. This ILS does come with a DME, which is basically distance measuring equipment, which tells you how far you are from the beacon itself. For an ILS, that would be at the runway. So we are 10 miles from the runway at this point. We have now reached 6,000 feet, meeting our restriction at Bojid. The next restriction is 4,000 feet at Furious. I'm going to dial down to 4,000 feet. Oh, down to 4,000 feet, my bad. We can see we're back at VNAV alt again because we are holding our altitude of 6,000. If we reach the top of the descent mark there and we're still not descending, then I'll click altitude intervention once again. We also have a speed restriction of 190 knots at IRI, so we're going to make sure that that is met by the time we reach IRI. We have just hit the deceleration point, and as you can see, we're slowing down. 190 knots is below our flaps setting, so we're actually going to give flaps 1 and make sure we can descend down to 190 knots. At this point, I'm going to turn on speed intervention so I can dial down to the speeds that I actually want. So after Furious, as per our flight plan, we're going to turn directly to the first point of our ILS approach of Festi. At this point, we can actually select the approach mode, and it will fly the ILS approach for us. Starting with the intercept, and then meeting the localizer, and then meeting the glide slope. I'm going to dial back to 180 knots. And give it a second notch of flaps. As you can see, our glide path is slowly descending to us, and we're nearing our top of descent. I'm just going to make sure we have 4,000 here for our 4,000 restriction here. And as you can see, we are not descending, so I'm going to click altitude intervention, and descend manual, and it will put us back on VNAV path. So now that we are nearing this end of our standard arrival, I'm going to have a look at our approach chart. For our approach chart, it says that at Festi, we should be at 3,000 feet. And we can also see that within our flight plan itself. So once we reach Furris, I'm going to dial to 3,000, make sure the heading is around a 30-degree intercept, and I'm going to click approach, and it will do our intercepts for us.
Thousand to go.
We have now reached the end of the star, so we're now turning towards our approach. I'm going to dial to 3000 and set altitude intervention so we can start descending. And then now we're going to do our approach checklist. So we're just going to check altimeter. Once again, you can click M for map and it will load the chart that is basically where you are at. After some time, we'll find a Philadelphia airport, click details, click altimeter. We'll check altimeter under conditions 3013. So altimeter is checked. Localizer frequency, we'll check once more. So we have 109.3. 109.3 is here, and a course of 267, which is here. The identifier is not here because we're too far. There it is. IPHL, which is not the correct one, but as we get closer, it will once again select the correct correct identifier. We'll just make sure that that is the right identifier first before selecting approach mode. At this point, I want to get down to 3,000 feet, and the flight computer seems to think that we are under the flight path. So I'm actually going to turn on vertical speed mode and dial down at a standard 1,500 feet per minute to the altitude of 3,000.
1,000 to go.
As you can see here, our identifier IGLC is now here. So I am going to wait till we turn back on our little purple line, our course here, and then I'm going to turn on approach mode. There we go. Approach mode will enter that, so we can see on our primary flight display that we have LNAV selected right now, and once we enter the LOC, it will put us onto localizer mode, which is armed. We also have altitude hold as we have entered, we're at 3,000 feet. And it will arm glide slope once we're on the glide slope. The localizer, you can see with this diamond here, it will become a pink solid diamond whenever the localizer is detected, and then it will intercept it so it stays in the middle. Same for the glide slope, it will turn to a pink full diamond and start to drop when it is detected. When it comes to airspeed, it's a good rule of thumb is whatever the distance measuring equipment is, multiply that by 10 at 100, and that's basically what airspeed you should be at. Sorry, multiply by 10 and then add 100, so that should be your airspeed. So around 200, you should be, at 10 miles out, you should be at around 200 knots. At 8 miles out, about 180 knots, all the way to your approach speed designated here. You can always be under that, but that rule of thumb is basically a maximum speed you should be at. As we are nearing, we can see that the localizer is detected and captured, and we are slowly turning, and we can see here that localizer is now the green text on top. We also see single channel here as we're only using one autopilot module or computer to fly the ILS approach. I'm going to give it flaps 5 around now and dial down to an appropriate speed in that area. 170 knots. And we can see our vertical speed is now detected. Or sorry, not vertical speed, our glide slope is now detected. And you can see it slowly dropping down. At this point, I'm going to click center twice so I can have a visual profile of the flight plan we have up ahead as well. And you can see now glide slope is active and we're following the pink diamond down. We are now descending. So we have the glide slope alive. We're going to click G for gear down. I'm going to give flaps 15. And I'm going to check the speed. So around then we should be at 160 knots, as you can see here. And then we will arm the speed brake, which is key bound to 4 again. One tap will arm it, and that's all we need. Second autopilot is not required because we have a good visual day today. We're going to turn on engine start switches to continuous. And then we'll set our landing flaps. So our landing flaps today is 30 with a speed of, we'll check that one more time, 144 plus 5, so 149 is our approach speed. And there we go. Approach checklist complete. Landing checklist. Go around altitude. So we'll check the chart here once again. The go around altitude is 3,000 feet. So we're going to make sure that the altitude is 3,000 here. Our runway turn-off lights do not need to be on as it's daytime. And our landing gear, check 3 greens are down. So autopilot and auto thrust will be turned off whenever you are comfortable. And then it's just a matter of landing. So as we're nearing, I'm going to turn the passenger cabin lights to takeoff and landing once again. And I'm going to give the PA system cabin crew prepare for landing. We now are at our approach speed. We're still on glide slope and localizer. And we are good to go. You can see the runway up ahead.
Thousand feet stabilized, Mr. Perch, altitude set.
Check. All right, I'm going to take over, and I'll see you on the ground.
Approaching 27 left.
Approaching minimums. 200. Minimums.
Continuing.
100. 50. 40. 30. 20. 10.
Lower landing gear, and reverser is deployed. Auto brake is armed, speed brakes have been deployed.
knots.
80 knots, still reversers. And under 40 knots, I'm going to turn off the auto brake by just clicking the brakes or tapping the brakes myself. We'll exit at this fast exit here. We're exiting on Sierra 11. So we're just going to cross-reference that in the chart. And I can see where I am now. So we're actually just going to turn right onto Zulu, which is right up ahead. Slow down to the appropriate taxiing speed. And we're going to go Zulu, Juliet to the ramp. American parks at Terminal A West. So that's the closest terminal we have. Alright, now that we're established at a good speed, I am going to do my after landing checklist. So I'm going to turn this back to altitude off. Whoops. I might have put into test mode. Turn off the chronometer. Flaps can come up. Speed brake can come up. Landing lights can be turned off. Taxi light can be turned on. Strobe lights can be turned off. Cabin lights can get their normal brightness again. Anti-ice is off. APU can be turned on. Hold that for 3 seconds.
Maintain vertical speed. Maintain vertical speed.
Pro P can be turned off.
Monitor
Engine start switches can go to off. And the auto brake can be turned off. We're turning right here. Oh, my bad. This is Kilo. All right, well, we'll just go to Kilo Bravo and then we'll go to Julia. We can turn that off. All right, so as we're taxiing to the assigned gate, we'll just make sure runway turn off lights are turned off. They were never turned on, so that's okay. APU gen can be turned on. Make sure that it is working and we have proper amps and voltage. And then as we're turning into the gate, we'll just turn off our taxi lights so we're not blinding the ground crew. We can also press the center button now to get rid of that vertical display. And as you can see up ahead, there is the terminal parking. Our weather radar can be turned off so that we're not blasting ground crew with weather radar. And terrain can also be turned off at this point on the other map. So we're going to turn into here. At this point, since it's daytime, I'm just going to turn off the taxi lights. They're no longer really useful. And we'll choose gate A24. Which is right there. So I'm going to take the exterior view and make sure that I am on the line. I'll choose a second line here. All right, good. So we're just going to turn on the parking brake, and we're going to finish our parking shutdown checklist. Parking brake in. We're going to make sure we have our APU generator on, and we have our parking brake set. Fuel can go to shut off. We're going to make contact with the ground. Passenger signs can be turned off. APU bleed can be turned on. Anti-collision light will wait until the N2 is below 1. Fuel pumps can come off. Anti-ice is off, or sorry, up here is off. Electric hydraulic pumps can be turned off. Isolation valve can be turned on. Our flight directors 1 and 2 can be turned off. Electric power where the ground is established, so we can turn that on and use the ground generator power instead. And then exterior lights check. N2 is now under 1, so the anti-collision light can be turned off. And now we just check that the outside lights are as they should be. So now we can go and open the doors, cargo doors as well, and we can also terminate the flight legs. So now that's our shutdown checklist complete. If you're shutting down for the night, we get security aircraft as well, so we can turn off the IRS mode selectors. The APU can be turned off. The left-half fuel pump is off. Emergency exit lights can be turned off. The window heat can be turned off. The packs can be turned off. Cabin lights are as they should be. And exterior lights, make sure they're all off. Standby power turned off. And then the battery can be turned off as well. And there you go. We are now in Philadelphia, completely shut down. If you have any questions, let me know in the comments or just message me. I'll see you next time.